Hello, welcome to Steven Shinder Reviews and video form, continuing Chucktober with day 10. This time talking about Chucky Season 1, Episode 3. I Like to Be Hugged. That's the title. Um, Directed once again by Dermot Downes and written by Nick Ziegler and Sarah Acosta, and it aired October 26th, or October 26th, 2021. So looking at Nick and Sarah's credits. So Nick Ziegler was a writer on the Purge TV series. I remember watching that a while back and feeling like season one definitely stretched the premise super thin. Maybe it could have been condensed into a movie. And then season two, I've forgotten much of what I thought of the Purge TV show, but thinking about how different the premise of season two is, maybe it was a little better, or maybe not. Like, I don't know. It's been forever and I just don't remember. Also wrote 10 episodes of that and wrote one episode of something called Walker Independence. And meanwhile, Sarah Acosta wrote 8 episodes of a TV show called Shooter, an episode of The Bite, which is a miniseries, and one episode of something called Super Pumped, and 3 episodes of a more recent TV show called Evil. I think my friend watches that show or watched it recently. Another friend says I'd like that show, but I just have not checked it out, so I don't know. So this episode begins pretty much right from where the previous one ended. Jake is contemplating taking out Lexi, but he's also not sure if he can be a killer. And he asks Chucky, like, how did you become a killer? And that's something that has never really been explored very much in the films. It's just that, he's a Lakeshore Strangler and then he became a doll. So this gets into how he became, um, or at least his first time committing murder. And, they make comparisons between, the very obvious comparison of like first times, and also later on Chucky says some people become killers, but the best are born. And you also wonder if this is supposed to be sort of parallel that whole debate of, are you born queer or do you become queer? And like I don't know. It's really weird when, in this and in the Hannibal TV show, it almost seems like they're trying to compare those two things when they're very different. Um, but anywho, so we get this flashback to when Charles Lee Ray was 8 years old and there was an intruder that breaks into the house, and we get the full context. Like, we come back to it toward the end of the episode. Like, it cuts back to part of it and then concludes with like the end of the situation, which I guess I'll just talk about that whole flashback here. So in 1965, the intruder breaks into the house, stabs Charles's dad to death, and his dying words are, "Charles, run." So 8-year-old Charles Lee Ray and his mother, they go to the room and hide in a closet. And when the intruder finds them in the closet, opens it and sees that Charles has stabbed his own mother to death. And he says, "I helped." And the intruder says, "You've got guts, kid, but you got to remember to cover your tracks," and shows him this trick of, I guess, wiping the blood on his sleeve or something. And then the intruder just walks off into the moonlit night on the street, off on his merry way. And, he tells Charles, "See you around, kid." But to my recollection, we never really see him again on the show. So, yeah, I don't know what happens to him, unless I've forgotten something, which could very well be the case, but I guess we'll see. So I quite like that in exploring Charles Lee Ray's backstory, they don't try to make it so that he was a killer born out of tragedy. It's more like, no, he was planning to commit his first kill. At his birthday party, he looked around and was trying to figure out who's the best candidate for the first kill, but all he needed was a little push. And so this thing with the intruder was a good cover up, a good, um, or quote unquote good. For him, it's the best opportunity to do this sort of thing and not be a suspect. So, and like I've said, I prefer this backstory over the one that's included in the Child's Play 2 novelization, which I think feels like it hasn't aged very well. Like, I think this one is more interesting. And so, in the present day, Chucky is trying to nudge Jake into killing Lexi, and so Jake monitors her habits. I think this is during a break at school, and I think I said before that this is a high school, but it's actually a middle school, Perry Middle School. And Jake is 14, so maybe it's one of those middle schools where it goes up to grade 9 or something. I don't know. But oh, there is an interaction with Devin. Jake is talking to Devin, and Devin is like, saying sorry about what happened to you last night at the party. I wish I could protect you. And during their conversation, Devin doesn't sound very convincing, but that's because he is secretly trying to record what Jake's response is to the whole Lexi thing. Because I think at this point he sort of suspects that Jake might end up doing something. And Jake at first thinks that Devin is legitimately concerned about him, but then he puts his guard up and he doesn't want to be suspected of whatever might happen to Lexi, so he goes off on his own. And we do see Jake spying on Lexi during her jogging routine. She's wearing this blue hoodie, and when he sees someone jogging by with a blue hoodie, he thinks it's her, runs up with a knife, but it turns out to be his cousin Junior. And he hides the knife, and Junior's like, "Why are you following me, you creep?" And then Junior confronts Lexi, saying that she should apologize to Jake and that she really went too far. And she's like, "Well, what's Jake gonna do?" And he's like, "Honestly, I don't know." And I was kind of surprised that Junior didn't so much as threaten to break up with Lexi. Like, if you don't apologize to my cousin, my family, I'm gonna break up with you. But I think the reason for that is that Oliver is around, and he suspects that if he and Lexi break up, then Lexi would fall back on Oliver, have him as a backup. So I think maybe he's insecure about that, and that's why he doesn't so much as threaten to break up with her. And so there are shades of that jealousy later as well. But Lexi's younger sister Caroline, she really wants Chucky. She's like, "I want Chucky. I want Chucky." So she's basically the fan surrogate. The audience that wants more Chucky. Hashtag renew Chucky, hashtag save Chucky, hashtag review Chucky for this series as well. And so Lexi tries to, apologize to Jake. She finds him in the garage where there are all these sharp tools. And the title card for this episode, the name Chucky is made up of like CGI renditions of these tools, but they're also on fire. For episode 2, I think it was knives and jack-o'-lanterns. So yeah, I like that they change it up, like how the title looks for each of these episodes. But yeah, the fire is very foreboding. Like you might suspect that, oh, something's gonna go down. But Lexi does a half-hearted apology at best. She concludes it with the addendum, even though you were blah 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 blah. And, she's just a terrible person. She does acknowledge that when she's upset, she maybe that's why she acts out and wants to hurt other people. And so you kind of wonder, like, is there a timeline where Lexi could have become maybe like a killer that Chucky is trying to mold? Like, I don't know. But she asks for the doll, and Jake says she can't have him. And part of it is that I think he's conflicted, still not sure if he wants Lexi gone. But also, it also feels like it's out of spite because the apology was a terrible one. But Jake talks to Chucky. Well, Jake is he has this sculpture and he's like stabbing it repeatedly until like candy or something falls out. And Chucky's like, it's called completion anxiety. So, a callback to that line from Curse of Chucky where Nika says that he has completion anxiety. And weirdly, around the time that film came out, when I tried searching completion anxiety on the web, like I couldn't really find anything at the time. But I think now there's like a bunch of things that talk about completion anxiety. So I kind of wonder if that was a thing in academic circles, and since then it's become more popularized. Like I'm kind of curious about that. But Chucky convinces Jake to basically put it all in his hands and Chucky's hands, so he'll do all the work. He has a knife, and Jake gives Chucky to Lexi, so that she can give it to Caroline. Meanwhile, the parents, Lexi and Caroline's parents, who I forgot to mention prior that her dad is played by the same guy who played Dr. Foley in Cult of Chucky. So, Don Mancini likes to reuse actors. This is part of a trend that happens in this era of the franchise. Um, and yeah, there's a nice focus on the parents. Devin's mom, Kim, the detective, she talked to Miss Fairchild, and then uh, later she talks to Devin, goes into his room while he's listening to the recording that he got of Jake earlier. They have this back and forth about privacy, and she doesn't want him interacting with Jake, and Devin takes it to heart, like, oh, so now you're choosing my friends, but also like I barely know him, so it's like this thing where Devin is like, you should know me better than that, but you also don't have the right to say who I should hang out with type thing, like he's a teenager, so he would act like that. But I like that he doesn't act out so much. Like he's not like one of those yelly teenagers. He's just a little defensive, but he's he's not too combative with his mom. And I think that's because well, people take it differently and react differently. He lost his dad years prior to this, and so I feel like this is a type of relationship where they're trying to be, at peace with each other, and they used to be closer apparently, according to dialogue prior, but yeah, I like that the relationships, how the parents and their kids interact, like they're not all the same in this show. And we get this parent teacher talk, Miss Fairchild and I think the principal, they talk with Lexi's parents as well as Junior's parents because they're currently Jake's guardians, and talking about the video of Lexi where she's pretending to be Lucas, and Logan Wheeler, Jake's uncle, he's like, that's my brother, and you really feel that anger that this is his brother is dead, and now Lexi is making a joke out of it type thing. So it feels very believable. But yeah, it's I do like that they shift the focus from the kids to the adults. And it basically ends in this whole thing of like, oh, maybe you should talk to your kids more and figure it out and whatnot. But then there's this whole thing. Um, Lexi invites friends over, including Oliver, who brings a drink, and Junior's like, "Why didn't you ask me to bring anything?" And she's like, "Your dad would flip," and blah 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 blah. So the jealousy is there, and they have this like silent disco party type thing. There's a song where it's like, "Oh, let it happen," like it's this dubstep sounding thing, and they're wearing headphones and listening to the music, which is being broadcast from the phone. Um, and Lexi is getting close with Oliver, dancing with him, while Junior is on the stairs just drinking from a cup and looking convincingly jealous. And he has, it does seem like there might be something between Lexi and Oliver. So, one can understand why he'd feel jealous, but at the same time, he should also try to participate in the party to show that he is interested in being there, wants to be there with Lexi. Um, uh, so it takes the change of a song, where Lexi's like, "I love this song," and she goes and gets a Junior and tries to get him to dance. Um, and meanwhile, Caroline is hanging out with Chucky. At one point, Lexi's like, "I thought you wanted to watch Westworld," and she's like, "Oh, Chucky wants to watch the news." And what's weird is on the news they say that Hackensack is one of the 10 safest cities, but in the first episode of this show, I think Devin on his podcast he said that murder rates have spiked 25% in Hackensack. So it's like, what are the stats here? Like, which is it? Like, what's going on? Um, but anyway, so Lexi also had to sing to Caroline to get her to go to bed. She sings "Don't Fear the Reaper," which I think is another nod to the original Halloween film, which includes that song. And because these episodes have had like those vibes of like the original Halloween in some places. So yeah, Caroline is in bed. Chucky says, "I'm gonna go kill your sister. You want to join me?" And she's too sleepy. Um, and at some point she gets up to look for Chucky, and then has to be put back to bed and whatnot. Um, so that's a whole thing. Meanwhile, Jake goes to the cemetery. He visits his parents' graves. His mom had died in 2015, and we see that the date for his father's death is October 19th, 2021, which leads me to believe that that's the air date of the second episode. So it makes me wonder if maybe originally the series was going to premiere on October 19th, but then it got pushed up earlier, like a week earlier. Because if it had premiered the 19th, then the next episode, which is the Halloween one, would have aired the 26th, which is closer to Halloween. So I kind of suspect that maybe there's a shift in release schedule there. And we also see Charles Lee Ray's gravestone is at the cemetery. It just says died November 9th, 1989. I guess they couldn't commit to a birth date for him. And I mean, the flashbacks, the chronology is a bit messy. In the first episode, you see a newspaper that says Wednesday, March 12th, 1965. And it talks about the Charles Lee Ray, the massacre at his home, his parents being murdered. But March 12th that year was not a Wednesday. And we also see like the Halloween 1965 flashback in the second episode, which seems to be like prior to when the massacre, or why am I calling it a massacre if it's not a massacre if it's two people, right? The double homicide. Um, so I wonder if maybe this is just another instance where I should just head canon like um a typo on the newspaper type thing. I don't know. Maybe the double homicide took place in November. Maybe Charles Lee Ray's birthday is around that time, similar to his death date. So I don't know. Um, but Chucky is walking around the house trying to find Lexi, and he stabs someone and then he sees that it's Oliver and he's like, "Oh shit, sorry, I thought you were Lexi." And that reaction, it's very comedic, but it's also really unsettling the way that he just, goes ahead and ends Oliver. Like, I think this was a real shock because, in slasher films, it is a staple to, I think lots of the characters are teens when they're eliminated, but here, like, especially today, and he looks really young. He's in middle school, so I think this was a really unsettling moment that maybe some viewers might not have expected, and it just shows how evil Chucky is. And Lexi goes off to hang out in, I think it's her room. It's like really red, so it kind of reminded me a bit of Twin Peaks. There's like this artsy slow motion shot when she runs up the stairs. I think the walls are red there too. Kind of reminded me a bit of Adam's apartment in the first Saw movie. But yeah, she goes to her room for a smoke, but then finds Chucky there, and he ends up setting the place on fire. And he's like, "This is for Jake," and he curses, but of course it bleeps the curse. And yeah, so it's like, "Ooh, what happened to Lexi? Has Chucky finally eliminated her?" Um, and of course, you find out for sure in the next episode. But yeah, we see Jake in the cemetery, and he's like, "Forgive me," and he like really regrets sending Chucky over there. And the kids, the Lexi's friends are still dancing around. Devin is also at this party. I should have mentioned, but they're sort of oblivious to the fire because of the headphones and stuff. But it does eventually become apparent. Um, so I feel like this episode did a decent job of conveying some of the conflict within Jake. He is really going back and forth on whether he wants to eliminate Lexi. We do see more of the anger here than in previous episodes. I do kind of think that maybe the show could have gone a little further, making it seem more plausible that he would become a killer, like this early in the season. Like, I don't know, maybe, like, I know not everyone is like this. Not everyone who watches horror movies or slasher movies is going to become a killer, but I kind of wonder if maybe they should have shown that as a habit of his, and how maybe he's a little mesmerized by the kills or something, or I don't know. But yeah, I feel like maybe they could have displayed a bit more of Jake's dark side to make it more convincing that he could be corrupted by Chucky. Um, and yeah, also Caroline, like, she's just going along with what Chucky wants. And something I noticed is, Lexi, she tells Caroline, like, "You better not tell our parents about this, this party that they're having in secret." And it's very risky to have this party during the parent teacher meeting, because it's like that wouldn't last very long. So, like, what was the reasoning here? And especially when they have headphones, it's like, how will they know when someone walks in? But yeah, there are some holes in that the more I think about it. But yeah, Lexi telling her little sister to keep this a secret, she's instilling bad habits into Caroline. And so it's like this weird thing going on. And Caroline is also uh because she has an eidetic memory, as we've heard before, she's considered a genius. But she's also very receptive to what Chucky has to say. So like there's like stuff going on there. But yeah, so this all evolves, and stuff happens later in the series. But overall, I thought this was definitely a stronger episode than the second one. I'm kind of going back and forth on whether I like it more than the first episode, but I think the more I think about it, the more, I mentioned like the little potholes or head scratchers or whatever you want to call them, but this really is a memorable episode and a huge spectacle, especially with the fire. And we see just how evil Chucky is. Like, we already know how evil he is, but get reminded of it here. So I think I'm going to go as high as a 9 out of 10 for this one. Like, I feel like some of the pieces are being moved effectively here, even though they could have shown a bit more of Jake's dark side. But I do like that they show his regret here. And yeah, so I think that's it for this episode. Tomorrow I'll be back talking about episode 4, which is titled Just Let Go. And so thanks for tuning in for another installment of Chucktober for Steven Shinder reviews in video form. And I'll see you all next time.